The Albanese government has become the joke of the internet, with businesses, large and small, lashing out against its changes to capital gains tax. And families are terrified about changes to trusts that amount to nothing less than a death tax. What should have happened in this federal budget is simple. Ministers should have made tough decisions to cut spending across every portfolio. Former Prime Minister and Treasurer Paul Keating has spoken about how exactly he did this in the 80s. He said, with my colleagues Peter Walsh and John Dawkins, and supported in the Expenditure Review Committee by Brian Howe and Ralph Willis, we set about dramatically reducing government spending. It took 4 exhausting years to do, program by program, department by department, while the terms of trade shock followed the fundamental reform of the tax system the previous year, 1985, very large income tax cuts, capital gains, fringe benefits, company tax cuts, imputation, etc. He says the changes set Australia up for 30 years of low inflation growth, the income surge that has since made Australia one of the wealthiest countries in the world. And now the opposite is happening. Taxes are rising, and it risks making Australia one of the worst countries in the world for business. Albanese government ministers should have done the same as Keating's team did back then. They should have significantly cut spending to lower inflation and fuel growth. But instead of asking their own ministers to swallow a tough pill, Labor has deliberately hurt ordinary Australians. And this at a time when families are already doing it so tough. High petrol prices, rising inflation pushing up the cost of everything from butter to coffee, and climbing interest rates. In this climate of extreme cost of living pressure, the government is now adding $77 billion in new taxes on Australians over the next decade. And it impacts everyone, from businesses to middle-income families who scrape together enough to buy an investment property, to parents who have set up trusts to protect vulnerable children. Now, the online backlash to the capital gains tax changes in particular has been extraordinary. You can't miss the businesses using AI to insert Albanese as their new 47% co-owner. It's flooding social media, with business owners fuming that the government is taking away the fruits of their hard work. But it seems Albanese thinks this is all a joke, and he just made light of it again today.
I think some of them are very flattering, and I thank them for picking very nice photos of me, and I thank them for that.
This isn't a joke. This will gut the business community in Australia and hurt families. The backlash is real. It's not misinformation. It's not just political opponents or commentators. It is real, and it's growing as businesses begin to understand the full implications of this tax package, and particularly the CGT changes. And the unanswered question is this: how does taxing businesses and shares in any way help younger Australians enter the property market? Because that is the stated aim of these changes. And it's nonsense. Of course it is. The Prime Minister can't explain why he's chosen to tax hard-working Australians, the vets, the cafe owners, the small business builders who have risked everything, worked tirelessly in their own time to create a self-sufficient enterprise of their own. Albanese doesn't understand the changes or how they'll impact business because he's personally never owned one. He's never spent a day working in a real job in the private sector. His whole life has been student politics and then federal politics. And listen to what he told this finance influencer.
Albanese just got completely exposed on live television, and the backlash against Labor's new tax changes is spiralling out of control. What started as frustration from business owners has now exploded into a nationwide revolt from investors, families, small business operators, and even people connected to Labor itself. And the most damaging part for the Prime Minister is that Australians are no longer buying the government's explanation for these policies. The TV host absolutely tore into Albanese over the government's capital gains tax changes, warning that Labor is turning Australia into one of the worst places in the developed world to run a business, while families are already struggling with soaring petrol prices, rising grocery costs, inflation, and climbing interest rates. The government is now preparing to hit Australians with another $77 billion in taxes over the next decade. That is why the anger online has become so intense. Then came the moment that perfectly summed up the disaster for Labor. Social media exploded with AI-generated images mocking Albanese as a 47% business partner, symbolizing the government taking nearly half the profits from people who spent years building businesses from the ground up. And instead of addressing the outrage seriously, Albanese laughed about it and called the memes flattering. That response only made the backlash even worse because struggling Australians do not see this as a joke anymore. The host then exposed the biggest weakness in Labor's argument. The government claims these tax changes will somehow help younger Australians enter the property market. But critics are asking one simple question. How does taxing businesses, shares, and investments help anyone buy a home? Even former Labor insiders are now publicly warning that these changes could devastate small businesses across the country. And that is where this situation becomes politically dangerous for Albanese. This is no longer just opposition politicians attacking Labor. Cafe owners, tradies, pharmacists, investors, and ordinary Australians planning for retirement are realizing they could all be impacted. Many feel the government is punishing people for taking risks and trying to build financial security for their families. The host also highlighted another brutal criticism of Albanese, that he has spent his entire life in politics and has never actually run a business in the private sector. And for many frustrated Australians, that disconnect is becoming impossible to ignore. Now the internet is turning against Labor, business confidence is collapsing, and even some Labor supporters are sounding the alarm. What was supposed to be an economic reform package is rapidly becoming a political nightmare for Albanese, and the backlash is only getting bigger. Drop your thoughts below. Are these tax changes helping Australia's future, or are they crushing the very people keeping the economy alive?